Okay, so there's this really interesting situation unfolding up in the Northern Territory, and that's where we're going to take our deep dive today.
Yeah, we're looking at how two work health court decisions from 2024 connect. They both come from the same case, actually. Maria Rust versus the Northern Territory of Australia.
And then, layered on top of that, there's this news article from just recently, April 2025. It talks about the, pretty sudden exit of a key figure from those court cases.
So, our mission here, for you listening, is to try and unpack these events, make sense of them.
Right. See how they link up, what the significance is, without, getting totally bogged down in all the legal jargon or every single news detail.
Exactly. We want to pull out the essential insights. Now, the central person in all this is Maria Rust. She was an employee
Of the NT government, her employer.
Correct. And she filed a work health claim, said she suffered an injury that led to total incapacity.
Total incapacity. That's a really key phrase here, isn't it?
It is. Very specific legal meaning. And the other main name that keeps coming up is Andrew Kirkman.
Andrew Kirkman. Okay, who was he?
Back in 2021, he was the CEO of DIPL.
DIPL. That's the Department of Infrastructure Planning and Logistics, for anyone keeping track.
That's the one. And it seems his interactions, specifically one meeting with Mrs. Rust, were kind of the starting point for this whole sequence.
And this isn't just guesswork, is it? The court itself had some strong words.
Very strong. The Work Health Court described Mr. Kirkman's behavior towards Mrs. Rust as, and this is a direct quote from the judgment, aggressive and threatening.
Wow, aggressive and threatening. From a court about a CEO's conduct towards an employee. That's significant.
It really is. Makes you think about the potential impact, right?
Definitely. So here's the plan. First, we'll properly dig into what those work health court decisions actually found. Look at the evidence, the court's reasoning about Mrs. Rust's injury.
And critically, how they viewed Mr. Kirkman's part in it all.
Then second part, we'll connect those dots. Link those court findings to this recent news about Mr. Kirkman leaving his job after a very long public service career.
Sounds like a good roadmap. Let's get into it.
Okay, first decision then. This is the one cited as 2024 NTWC 9. Handed down July 8th, 2024. Acting Judge Neal and Darwin. This one really sets the scene.
It absolutely does. The fundamental question for the court was, did Mrs. Rust's mental injury happen because of that specific meeting she had with Mr. Kirkman on July 30th, 2021?
Right. Was there a direct causal link? Did that meeting cause the injury? And did that injury lead to her being totally unable to work? That connection was key.
Precisely. Causation. They had to dissect what happened in the meeting, what injury she actually claimed, and if one directly led to the other.
Now, interestingly, the documents say it was Mrs. Rust who asked for the meeting with Kirkman, the CEO.
That's right, but her description of it. Well, she said she felt bullied, that he was overbearing, and she said he told her she had to move roles.
Had to move roles.
Yeah.
And the reason given?
This is where it gets quite remarkable. The reason given, according to her account, was rumors.
Rumors? Just rumors.
Yep. Rumors about a supposed relationship between her and her direct manager. That was the justification presented in the meeting for needing her to change positions. It certainly raises flags about process, doesn't it?
It really does. So what was the specific injury she claimed resulted from this, the medical side of it?
The legal documents identify it as an adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. There was also mention of possibly a severe major depressive disorder. And crucially, she linked it directly to that meeting and how Mr. Kirkman behaved.
So, a very clear cause and effect claim, saying his actions had this direct, serious impact on her mental health. It really highlights how workplace interactions, especially with that kind of power dynamic, can have real consequences.
And how the legal system views those consequences. The timeline after that July 30th meeting is also quite telling, you know?
How so? What happened next?
Well, the records show that in August 2021, pretty much straight after the meeting, she started working from home, reduced hours.
Yeah, an immediate change in how she worked.
Then, fast forward just a few months to December 2021, she's certified as totally incapacitated.
Totally incapacitated, that quick. That sounds serious.
It implies a significant deterioration. And remember, total incapacity usually means unable to do any reasonably suitable work, not just her old job.
Right, and it didn't stop there.
No. Her employment was suspended in May 2022, and then she was terminated in June 2022.
So you can see this clear progression all following that one meeting. This must have given the court some very specific things to rule on.
Absolutely. First, what actually happened in that room between Rust and Kirkman? Second, did she suffer an injury recognized by work health law? Third, and this is vital, was that injury caused by the meeting? That link.
And there was also that potential defense for the employer, right? The reasonable management action thing.
Exactly. That's under subsection 3A2 of the Return to Work Act. It basically says an employer might have a defense if the injury came from reasonable action, taken reasonably, related to the job.
Reasonable and reasonably. Key words.
Definitely. So the court had to weigh up. Was Kirkman's conduct telling her about a role change based on rumors? Apparently, in that specific way, was that reasonable management action done reasonably? That was a huge point.
And finally, was her incapacity truly total?
Correct. Big questions. And answering them involved looking at a lot of evidence.
Yeah, the documents mention medical records, GP, psychologist, psychiatrist reports. So a full medical picture.
All that expert medical evidence was considered, plus, of course, testimony from Mrs. Rust herself, from Mr. Kirkman.
And from colleagues as well.
Yes, colleagues too. And this wasn't rushed. The hearing took 16 days.
16 days. That tells you how deep they went. The level of detail must have been immense.
It's a long time for a hearing like this. And the findings about Kirkman's behavior in that meeting, well, as we said, they seem pretty stark.
Yes. The judgment apparently mentioned recordings. Parts of the meeting were recorded. And witness accounts of his tone, his volume.
And that specific detail you flagged earlier.
Yes. The quote saying he was pounding his fists on his desk.
Pounding his fists. That creates quite an image, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Makes that reasonable management action defense perhaps seem harder to maintain.
You'd think so. It definitely challenges the idea of a calm, standard managerial discussion. Now, of course, the court would have also looked into Mrs. Rust's history.
Pre-existing conditions, that sort of thing.
Standard practice. They need to be sure the injury was truly caused or significantly contributed to by the work event, not just something else entirely.
Makes sense. And circling back to that reasonable management action point, Section 3A2.
Yeah, the onus is on the employer to prove their actions were reasonable and done reasonably.
So the judgment call was telling someone they have to move jobs because of gossip, delivered in that manner, reasonable or not.
A very fine line to tread legally. The judgment would detail the arguments, but the final conclusion is what matters most here.
And that conclusion was?
The court found clearly that Mrs. Rust did suffer a work-related mental injury, and, crucially, that it was directly caused by that meeting with Mr. Kirkman on July 30th, 2021.
Wow. So a direct finding of causation against Kirkman's actions. A significant win for Mrs. Rust, and a clear finding against the NT government.
Hugely significant. Which then brings us fairly quickly to the second court decision.
Right. 24 NTWHC5. End of July 2024, same judge. This one was about the money, wasn't it? Legal costs.
Exactly. Once the main fight was decided, injury caused by the meeting, the next question was, who pays for the legal battle? That 16-day hearing, lawyers.
Yeah.
It adds up.
A lot. And the documents say the NT government, having lost the main case, objected to something about a mediation conference.
Yes, a work-safe mediation that happened earlier. They argued about confidentiality, basically saying stuff discussed in mediation shouldn't affect the decision on who pays the costs of the court case itself.
Seems like a standard legal argument to make. But what was the outcome? Who did the court say had to pay?
The court ruled against the government on that point. Costs were awarded to Mrs. Rust.
Okay. And what does an award of costs like that usually signal? Does it imply anything about how the court viewed the original defense?
Often, yes. It can suggest the court felt the losing party's case wasn't strong enough, or perhaps that they shouldn't have let it get that far. It implies Mrs. Rust shouldn't be out of pocket for having to fight it in court, given the outcome.
So it kind of reinforces the initial finding.
It can be seen that way, yes. It essentially says the NT government has to cover her legal bills for that whole work health claim process.
Despite their arguments about the mediation confidentiality.
Correct. That was the result.
Okay, so recapping 2024. Court finds Kirkman's actions caused Rust's injury. Court awards cost to Rust, which sets the stage perfectly for this April 2025 news report.
Exactly. The news article details Andrew Kirkman leaving his executive job suddenly, and after, 26 years in public service?
26 years is a long time, and the article stresses the word sudden.
And the timing is quite noteworthy, let's say, given everything that came before.
Noteworthy how? What else was going on?
Well, the article mentions his departure happened during what it calls a growing scandal at the Darwin Waterfront Corporation. There were calls for an inquiry into that, apparently.
So other potential controversies swirling around him at the same time.
Seems that way. But also, perhaps more directly relevant to our story, he left just over a month before another court date.
The federal court hearing involving Mrs. Rust again.
That's the one, her general protections application.
General protections.
Yeah.
Remind us what that covers typically.
It's usually about claiming you've been treated badly, maybe even dismissed, because you exercised a workplace, right? Like filing that work health claim or because you had a workplace injury. Unfair treatment, essentially.
Got it. And the article made a point about who was paying for Kirkman's lawyers in that federal case, didn't it?
It did. Taxpayers. The public purse was funding his defense.
So he leaves his job shortly before this federal court date. Taxpayers footing his bill, and amidst these other issues at the Darwin Waterfront Corps, the timing does make you wonder.
It certainly raises questions about connections. And the news report doesn't shy away from linking his departure back to those work health court findings we just discussed.
No, it explicitly brings up Judge Neal's finding that aggressive and threatening behavior caused Mrs. Rust's injury, making her unfit for work. The link is drawn very clearly.
And the fact it's a general protections case adds another layer. It's just Mrs. Rust felt things went wrong after the initial injury incident as well.
Then there's the cost to the public again.
Yeah, the article throws out an estimate, suggests taxpayers might be on the hook for about $1 million already, just from the costs awarded in that first work health case.
$1 million. Wow. Mostly because the court ordered the government to pay her costs.
So a hefty price tag already. Now, what about the departure itself? How did Kirkman announce it? There was an email.
Yes, an internal email to staff. The article quotes him saying he was stepping out of my role, felt it was the right time for exciting opportunities outside the public service after 26 years. Pretty standard departure language.
Sounds very familiar, yes. Mentioned his past jobs at DIPL, Darwin Waterfront. But the government, what did they say officially? Resigned. Fired.
This is where it gets a bit murky. The government's response was, according to the article, quite vague. They wouldn't confirm resignation or dismissal.
Vague. What did they say then?
Just that his contract is concluded.
His contract has concluded. That's ambiguous, isn't it? Doesn't really say much at all. Leaves a lot unsaid.
It really does. You have to wonder why the lack of clarity fuels speculation about what really happened behind the scenes.
And the article also mentioned those other issues, the ones at Darwin Waterfront, separate from the Rust case, but still involving Kirkman.
Yeah, allegations about potential conflicts of interest, improper recruitment involving him and his wife, apparently. So it looks like there might have been pressure from multiple angles.
It paints a picture of a complicated end to his tenure, certainly, with various things potentially coming to a head. And then there was that online comment the article included. Need to be careful with those, but...
Oh, right. The unverified claim about a judge initially on the Rust case having to step aside because they were supposedly a Kirkman fishing buddy.
Yeah, totally unproven, just an online comment. But if something like that were true, it would obviously raise huge questions about potential bias or conflicts. We just don't know, though.
We don't. And important to remember, the article notes Kirkman himself has consistently maintained he did nothing wrong.
Right. His departure email certainly didn't suggest any admission of fault regarding the court's findings about his conduct. It was all very forward-looking.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together for everyone listening. We've got the Work Health Court in 2024 making a very clear finding. Kirkman's behavior back in 2021 directly caused a serious mental injury to Mrs. Rust, made her totally unable to work.
Then the court ordered the government to pay her legal costs, which, as we discussed, often hints at the court's view of the defense's strength.
Fast forward to early 2025. Kirkman suddenly leaves his job after 26 years.
And this happens while there's other scrutiny related to the Darwin Waterfront Corporation, and just before he's due back in court for another case brought by Mrs. Rust.
A case where taxpayers were paying his legal fees.
And those original court findings about the 2021 meeting, the aggressive and threatening behavior, they definitely hang over the whole situation surrounding his departure.
It really makes you ask some bigger questions, doesn't it? Like, what does this tell us about accountability, especially for senior people in powerful positions?
How are these situations handled inside government? What does it mean for public trust when things like this play out?
Exactly, because even though the Work Health Court made its findings on what happened in 2021 and the consequences.
That ongoing federal court case, plus the, let's call them murky circumstances of Mr. Kirkman's exit, it means there are still loose ends, still unanswered questions.
Feels like maybe we haven't heard the whole story yet. What happens with that federal case, for example?
Precisely. It leaves you thinking the full picture might still be emerging. Definitely something to potentially keep an eye on if you're interested in these kinds of workplace issues.
Absolutely. And it prompts that broader reflection, doesn't it?
Hmm.
What are the implications here for employee rights, for how power is exercised, and the responsibilities that come with it? Maybe something for you, the listener, to think about in your own context based on what we've unpacked today.